Are you ready to grow beets from seed, but you're not really sure how to get started?
Today, we're going to help you build your beet knowledge and show you how to sow your beet seeds step by step. If you want to grow beets as microgreens, we'll show you how to do that a little bit later in this video.
Hi, we're Sean and Allison from Spoken Garden, and we're partnering with Eden Brothers to help you in your garden.
We want to help you become a better gardener and grow your best vegetables and flowers this year. So let's talk about beets. So before we show you how to plant beet seeds, there's a couple things we'd like you to know. First, beets are an annual root vegetable and they're hardy in zones 2 through 10. Now beets, also known botanically as Beta vulgaris, are a cool season crop and they grow really well in the spring and fall months, but you won't be able to get them to grow and produce that root vegetable in the summer months or the warm season. Now the beets we're going to show you how to sow today are called Ruby Queen, and they're an heirloom open pollinated variety, and they're an AAS winner. It's an early producer and it's great for canning, pickling, and for microgreens. Now, if you do plan on growing beet seeds as microgreens, you can expect to harvest them in 10 to 14 days after germination. If you're growing beets as a root vegetable crop, you can expect to harvest them in about 35 days after germination. If you're going to grow beets for their greens or their leaves, you can expect to harvest at 35 days after germination. Before you sow these seeds for growing them as microgreens or for their leafy greens or for the root vegetable, you're going to need to soak these for 24 hours or at least overnight before planting.
Okay, so here are some fun facts about Ruby Queen beets. First of all, they're really easy to grow and maintain. They're very fast growing and have an upright plant form. They have a sweet, nutty, earthy flavor. These beets will thrive in full sun and they have average water needs. Now beets will grow best in a well-draining, nutrient-rich soil, but they can tolerate some poor soils. But just keep in mind that too much water in the soil can stunt the growth and cause root rot. Now these Ruby Queen beets can be semi-cold hardy, but they're also drought tolerant. These beets should grow up to 10 or 12 inches tall, and they're great for containers, and they're also great for culinary gardens. All right, let's talk about when to sow your beet seeds so you can get them in the ground at the right time. You can direct sow them in early spring as soon as your soil is workable, but make sure that it's probably about 4 weeks past your last hard frost. You also want to make sure that your soil temperature is consistently above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for best germination. If you live in a colder zone, you can plant your beets in both early spring and early fall, but if you live in a warmer zone, you can plant your beets year-round as long as your soil is workable.
So there's a couple more things we want to tell you about before we show you how to directly sow your seeds out in your garden. And we want to reiterate to you and remind you that you're going to need to soak your seeds in water for 24 hours or at least overnight before you sow them. So you can use a little Tupperware dish like this or a little bowl, fill it with a little bit of water, and then just place your seeds in it and let them soak overnight. Now beets will grow really well in most garden soils or even potting soil. You can even use different kinds of seed starting soil. You just need to make sure that it drains really well. So you can see right here, we've got our garden soil, it's prepped. We need to pre-soak the soil before we sow the seeds, and then we'll soak them in afterwards too. Now beet seeds in general need to be planted about a ½ inch down below the soil surface. They also need to be spaced about 2 to 4 inches apart, and if you're gonna grow these in rows, you're gonna need to space those rows 12 to 18 inches apart. So we've got our beet seeds, they've been soaking overnight, and so we're going to plant them out in this raised garden bed. And you can see we've marked out in general where we want to plant our rows, about 12 inches apart. So I'm going to take my favorite seed sowing tool and I'm going to go to a ½ inch depth on this, and I'm just going to make 2 trough rows here that I'm going to plant my seeds into. So let's take our seeds that we've been soaking overnight and we're going to drain the water out of this so we can just grab those seeds fairly easily. So I'm going to drain the water, as you can see here, really slowly. We've got these drained off. Now we're going to take our tool and grab a couple of these out of here, and we're going to spread them out on our tool here, and then we're just going to place 1 to 2 seeds. If I can get them off my fingers here. We're going to place 1 to 2 seeds every 2 to 4 inches. And then we can just cover them up, and then we'll pat them down and then water them in. Make sure to thoroughly soak this area in, but use gentle watering. You don't want to dislodge or move any of the seeds or soil around when you're watering them in. Now, after you've sown your seeds, you want to make sure that you keep the soil consistently moist. The more consistently you water them and the moisture is kept tight around those seeds, the faster and more consistently you're going to have germination of those seeds. Now, your seeds should germinate anywhere between 5 and 12 days, and the warmer the temperature and the soil is, the faster they're going to germinate. Now, if you want to grow these beets for a continual root crop or leafy greens, you'll need to sow the seeds every 2 to 3 weeks so you get those continual crops. Once your seedlings have grown 4 to 5 inches tall, you can space or thin them out if you haven't already when you planted them to about 2 to 4 inches so you get smaller, more uniform sized roots. Now, if you want a larger root size on your beets, make sure to space them 6 or more inches apart and you will get more of a 3 or more inch size root. Now, in the weeks and months to come, you'll need to make sure to consistently water your beets. They have average water needs, so the more consistent you are with their watering, the healthier they're going to be. Now, if you underwater your beets, they're going to grow smaller and they're going to have less flavor. But if you overwater your beets, you run the risk of them actually rotting. Now, if your garden soil is low in nitrogen, you can always apply a well-balanced fertilizer. Be sure not to apply a fertilizer that's really high in nitrogen, though, if you're growing for the root vegetable itself. Now, if you're growing for the leafy greens, definitely use a high nitrogen fertilizer. Now, when you're watering your beet plants through their whole growth cycle, you want to make sure that you're watering the actual soil. You don't want to water the plants themselves, like over the top watering. And the reason for this is that plants are susceptible to different bacteria and fungal diseases, and if you water over the top, they'll be more susceptible to those diseases. You can also keep up the weeding around your plants so there's not a lot of competition for those nutrients, for the water, and for the sunlight as they're growing. To help with suppressing weeds, you can also add in some mulch. A good wood chip mulch or some type of like straw or some other type of mulch itself will help suppress the weeds and keep moisture in the soil really around those roots and readily available for your beet plants. And as I mentioned before, beets are susceptible to different types of bacterial and fungal diseases, especially bacterial blight and root rots, so make sure not to overwater the plants or their roots.
You can expect to harvest your beet roots in 50 to 60 days after germination. Once a beet root grows to 1 to 3 inches in diameter, they are ready to be harvested. To harvest your beets, once the desired root size is reached, they can be dug up and the soil can be cleaned off. Beet roots can be stored for several weeks before use or consumption, or needing to be frozen, canned, or pickled. Cut away any leaves and stems, leaving 1 to 2 inches of stem on the top of the beet root. Harvest in the early morning after watering when the plants are least stressed. Leafy greens can be ready to harvest in as little as 35 days. Beet leaves will need to be completely separated from the root for the longest shelf life and stored separately. It's best to harvest leaves when the beet roots and leaves are still young and tender and the leaves are around 2 to 3 inches long. If you harvest leaves before harvesting the beets themselves, leave 2 or more leaves on each plant so the root can continue to grow and develop until harvest. If you want to sow your beets as microgreens, here's how to do it. First, I wanted to remind you that you need to soak your beet seeds for at least 24 hours or overnight even would be sufficient. The great thing about microgreens is they're really fast to grow and you don't need very many supplies. You definitely need some type of shallow tray or pan. This is an actual microgreens tray that we bought online, but any type of shallow pan will do. You just need to make sure that your tray has the proper depth. Like for example, these beet seeds need to be sown at a 1/2 inch deep. So this tray needs to be deeper than that, obviously. Other supplies, you need some type of potting soil or seed starting mix or any type of general purpose soil. We're using pre-moistened seed starting soil and we've already pre-filled the tray so it's ready to plant. The next step is to plant your seeds, and you want to make sure that the soil you've already added is only a 1/2 inch below the top of the tray because you're going to add more soil later. So hold on to that step. So now we're going to sow the seeds, and I've got them all out of the water in my hand here. I'm just going to scatter them across the top layer of the soil. Next, we need to add some more soil to the top to cover the seeds, and we only need to add a 1/2 inch layer. So I'm spreading the soil that I'm adding evenly and I'm matching it to the top of the tray so I know that a 1/2 inch has been reached. And I'm going to firmly pat it down once I get to the level I want. I need a little bit more. I'm just going to lightly add that. I'm going to firmly pat it down. All right, the last step is to water this in thoroughly so that you start the germination process. And I'm going to use a very light drip water because I don't want to spray the soil everywhere and dislodge the seeds. And that's how you sow your beets for microgreens. Next steps are to place this tray in a warm area so your soil stays consistently warm between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and that will lead to best germination. You want to make sure you keep your soil consistently moist, and one of the best ways to do that is to cover this whole tray with a humidity dome or even just a layer or a sheet of plastic wrap. Also, make sure to place this tray under grow lights or in a well-lit sunny windowsill. With all of these conditions being met, you can expect to harvest your microgreens in 10 to 14 days. You can harvest your beet microgreens when the seedlings have developed their first set of true leaves. Harvest by cutting each seedling stem with clean scissors just above the soil surface. Rinse your microgreens in cool, cold water and allow them to dry before either placing them in salads or other dishes. You can store them in the refrigerator in a container with a damp paper towel.
Now, if you need more vegetable or flower growing or planting tips, you can always go to EdenBrothers.com and check out their planting guides.
And we hope this video was really helpful for you in sowing your own beet seeds and also sowing beets as microgreens. And from us at Spoken Garden and Eden Brothers, thank you for watching.